Sie hören Sport und Musik.
Das Spiel ist aus! Deutschland ist Weltmeister!
In a world where fans fight over whether to call it football, or soccer, two German men defy the odds and call it Fußball. Bringing you inside the German-American football experience. And now, here are your hosts, the Schnitzel Boys.
We're here. We're here to bring you
inside
the German-American football experience.
Right.
How is your German-American football experience tonight, Stefan?
Good. It's good. There's all sorts of stuff. As far as intersecting the German and the American thing, there's always stuff going on because the United States has a very how would you describe the relationship between U.S. soccer and German soccer? It's very much like a little brother, bigger uncle, some type of situation.
Well, I think this is it depends on where you are, right? Like, I think it's geography plays a huge part there. I think the Germans pay very little attention to the Americans.
But
And
from our point of view, from the German-American point of view, there's a lot going on. From their point of view to us, there's very little going on.
Right.
I guess, right? I mean, they're really into the youth, right? They love was it in England? I think a couple of the coaches over the weekend, who was it? Mentioned like, some minor league coach in England, some lower league coach in England talked about how Weston McKennie wasn't good enough for the Premier League. He said that. And he said Weston McKennie isn't good enough for the Premier League, which is crazy because he's coming off a year and a half of Juventus and Schalke, so he should be just fine for the Premier League. And he said, however, Tyler Adams is very good. And he's like, and he said the Americans aren't bad. He's like, they all come through Germany. So he said he called Germany the middleman in which Americans come to Europe. And he's right. Because it's like, with Kevin Paredes and Paxton Aronson and Eintracht Frankfurt, the German clubs are ready to buy Americans, just like they're ready to buy people from anywhere. Train them, invest in them. All the clubs are ready for the youth academy, ready to invest and give them some time and maybe a loan, but really rarely a loan, usually training. And then they're ready to invest and create players. So that's what Germany does for us.
I think that also has really changed. Culturally in Germany, there used to be much fewer younger players. I think there's now really an influx, and this is not necessarily just, obviously they're not all Americans, right. But there's young players from everywhere, and I think it's become more part of the business model. I think in the Bundesliga that you develop young players and then you sell them. I was watching Leeds and I think Hoffenheim executives are still probably laughing all the way to the bank that they got 38 million for Georgino Rutter, who is, we'll see how he has not exactly looked Premier League ready to me. I don't think I never really thought of him as, I guess he's very young. He's 20 years old, so he's got that going. There's the possibility of future, but I never watched Hoffenheim going like, oh, that guy's going places. I thought he was fine, and so to get that much for him, I think Hoffenheim is probably feels good about that deal. And so that's become more and more, I think, part. I think the average age in the Bundesliga has gone down a lot in the last however many years, and so that's definitely a trend.
There's less bald spots in the Bundesliga. Just before, just before we went on, I thought to myself, I'm still in player age, kind of. I'm 36. There's 36-year-olds that play professionally.
You could still make it.
Well, I could still hope for me, but no, I'm bald. I'm balding. I've been balding for a long time. I got a big beard. I wonder if I was ever more athletic if I'd bald like this. And back in the day, like in the 80s and the 90s and the 70s, there were players, like if there were 30-year-olds that looked like 40-year-olds. You know what I'm talking about? They were bald. They essentially were bald, or they're balding with big bald spots.
Right. They had sort of the kingpin type comb over. Yeah.
Yeah. Like a Tom Dooley is a good example of that. He's like a German dude. He played for the US, but he's a German guy. But like when he was 30, he looked like nowadays, that's what 45-year-olds look like. Back when he was like in his 30s.
Well, I think that has to do with a trend in the hair replacement industry, right? I think it's like Wayne Rooney sort of started that, right? The hair plug, where it became
plugs. Did Wayne Rooney get plugs?
Am I not? Is that not a thing? That's my.
I'm curious.
Impression. I think it just became people just sort of do more about it. I think in the 70s and 80s when I was growing up, you just let the hair just sprout, like whatever you had, you grew a lot of, and then
that's what I do.
Whatever you didn't have, you just didn't have. But now I think that's a general trend. Soccer players much more coiffed than they were in my youth, for sure.
That's a good question. How many soccer players go through like hair therapy or hair replacement therapy? I assumed it was all natural.
We'll never know, but I think
on Rogan.
I think there's a lot of that. I think men in general are spending much more time and money on their appearance than they used to or thought. Yeah.
That's true. That makes me feel better because I spend no time on my appearance. So I'm retro. I'm right out of the 80s. I look like
you're old school.
I'm old school.
You're old school. You're old school. I'm just old.
Yeah. Well, you look good. You look. If people say who was the younger one, I'm sure you would have gotten plenty of votes.
I'm 52 years old. I do not. I don't mind saying that.
You look good. You look good for 52, my friend.
Thank you.
I do not look amazing for 36. I'll tell you that. 36 people look way better than me, but that's not here to shame myself.
This is not right. You're
shame podcast. But going back to your thought originally, so the Bundesliga is now being derogatorily. No, that's not the right word, but it's being referred to as a farm league, which feeds into my diatribe where I think the German clubs care more about their bottom line than actually winning championships. My criticism, and like you said, if it's the average age, they it's like a trickle down economy, isn't it? A little Reaganomics for you. If German clubs know the English clubs are like hopped up on steroids because they just have all this billions of dollars from the Middle East, from wherever.
Well, I think that's exactly what it comes down to. I think if you want to get into the economics of it, there is the Premier League. And I think that's also a very new development over the last couple of years. The Premier League just outspends the rest of the world in ways that are just dramatic. I think it's now, I don't have the numbers ready, but it's like, I think this latest window, I think English clubs spent like $2.2 billion on transfer fees or something, some incredible number, which is
it's always a new record.
But it also is like multiples more than everybody else combined, and it's not just the top. They were always the Chelseas and not always, but for a long time now, they have been the Chelseas and the Man Cities or the Man Uniteds historically that had just more money than everybody else. But now even Bournemouth outspends Juventus, even Leeds outspends most other teams. So it's the entirety of the Premier League, and the Premier League has, and some of it is an influx from outside, like Chelsea's new billionaire owner wants to splurge wildly on anybody he can find, or there's oil money, there's influx from outside, but there's also just a lot of money generated. The Premier League is hugely successful worldwide. It's now a global brand. They collect real money from their TV contracts internationally in a way that other leagues don't. I think I again don't have the exact numbers, but what ESPN pays for Bundesliga rights is a fraction of what NBC pays for Premier League rights. So they are in a different, I mean, literally in a different league financially than everybody else. So this is just kind of where these things go. And the Bundesliga doesn't have the same amount of outside investment because of the rules, and because also all culturally, I think I actually read an interview with the VfL Bochum executive, Ilya Kensik, and he was sort of talking about this. He was talking about like looking for investors. You know, people are like, because Bochum is, you know, it's a small club and they don't have a ton of money to spend. And then people are like, oh, you need to get investors. And he was saying, well, yeah, you can find people, but there's always strings attached. You're either, you know, they want a discount on the money they give you now for future ownership. You're basically, and you see this now with Barcelona or Chelsea now basically structuring their contracts long term to comply with financial rules, et cetera. So the Germans are too conservative. They are. It's like, we're not going to mortgage our future to succeed in the present. And so it's a cultural issue, and it's also but it's also just a matter of, I mean, it's impossible. They cannot compete with those numbers for the Premier League for now. But also historically, these things kind of change, right? They come and go. It used to be Italy, it used to be Spain. The Italian league went through a real crisis that I think they're still probably in. And so these things also change over the years. It's not like it's not set in stone that this is always it's always going to be like this. But for now, yeah, the German teams are kind of, but everybody else is too. It's not just.
Well, I'm wondering, is La Liga and Serie A also a farm league to the English Premier League?
Well, I think they are still. I mean, I think they are struggling to keep up. Right, the top teams, they have. I mean, much like the Bundesliga, they have a big drop between the top teams and everybody else. And this whole, you know, the whole idea of the Super League that came up, you know, which basically was devised by the Spanish, by Barcelona, Real Madrid, and Juventus, and it's basically designed to help them out with their current cash problems, right? That this was all designed to give a huge cash influx immediately to these clubs to be able to keep up and balance their books somehow, and also kind of enshrine their status as European greats into the super, you know, because they were like these 15 spots or whatever of teams that wouldn't get relegated. And I think this comes from a concern of these teams, the Real Madrids and the Barcelonas and the Juventus. I mean, Juventus.
I don't think it comes from concern. I think it comes from the fact that, like, we can make more money. I think.
Well, but I think concern about being able to keep up, concern about becoming irrelevant or becoming second tier to these like cash machines that are the English clubs.
Well, you know, I think the Champions League does that. I think the Champions League is still a pretty balanced, like you know, other than Real Madrid winning 3 times in a row, it's usually a different winner every year, you know. And some years the English teams dominate, but some years the English teams flounder, you know.
Yeah.
And then this year, so with all that being said, with it being a trickle down, right? Clubs like a Hoffenheim and a Bochum love the fact that they can make serious cash selling their players to England. They like lick their lips on that, because then that cash they can use to pay for everything. Like that, it keeps the clubs afloat almost. But the good news is only 11 players are allowed on the field at any given time. So the English clubs can buy established players, but the German clubs, like, their scouting is second to none. Has to be, because they're always ready to go with next man up. And the next man up, who you never heard of before, all of a sudden they're there, they're hot, and 6 months later the English clubs want that guy. You know, it's just basic scouting. At the end of the day, scouting, like really, really good top tier scouting, and the youth development system, which the German clubs have in spades, is a great way to essentially just save money on having top class players. Yeah. It's like, we'll just make the next ones. You can buy them. We're going to keep making them. So, and then you look at the Champions League this week, which we'll touch on. We'll preview a little bit. 4 German clubs are still in the competition. I think there's more German clubs than any other country except for maybe England.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, there's still only one French club there. Napoli's there. I think Napoli, I'm going to look it up right now. But there's 4 German clubs, which there have been in the past. Usually by the quarterfinals, there's really only Bayern.
Yeah, I was going to say this is a bit of a. I mean, we'll see how it goes. This is a bit of a fluke because the last few years this has not been the case. This is it's not a trend. It's this, but yeah, it's happening. And no, I mean that's the beauty of it, right? It's not like you can just buy your way. I mean, Chelsea, they just spent more money than the gross domestic product of many countries in the transfer window, and it's still chaos. You have to,
and they're up against Dortmund, right? So who's going to win in the Chelsea Dortmund game? I don't know. That'll be a fun game. It's a good example of this. That's almost like the haves versus the have-nots. It's the Dortmund are like the quintessential modern German club. They're like a big club with a big following, great fan culture, but they don't spend any money on players. So like all their players are freebies or from the youth development. They figured out how to make a roster without breaking the bank. And Chelsea is the exact opposite. They've spent like $900 million. How much is that to $600 million? How much did they spend? They spent a ridiculous amount of money this year.
Yeah. That
$2.2 billion in transfers, like 40% of that was from Chelsea.
A lot of it is Chelsea. Yeah.
And they're gonna, but now when all that's said and done, right? Now it's 2 games, toe to toe, 11 people on the field, 90 minutes on the clock. Who's gonna win? And honestly, look at that. And like Chelsea's 10th, right? Dortmund's in a good run. The defense is still a suspect, but they're in a good run of form. I don't know. I think Dortmund can do that one, right? It's going to be
It's going to be an interesting game. I'm excited. I'm excited to watch it. But yeah, because Chelsea, I watched a little bit of their game over the weekend. It's like they play like they just met, because they just met, because that's what happened. And I mean, it's on a lower level, same league, Nottingham Forest. Similarly, they just signed everybody, not quite to the same, the same amount of money as Chelsea, but still a lot of players. And they now, I think, the last game they started 2 people that were on the roster when they got promoted. So, and
you know what their
biggest loss was? It takes some time.
You know what their biggest loss was?
Who was their biggest loss?
Ethan Horvath. They loaned him to the championship.
They got Keylor Navas. Keylor Navas is at Forest now. That was like bizarre. Absolutely,
it was very bizarre. Oh yeah, forgot about that.
Surreal kind of a
forgot about that.
Keylor Navas, yeah.
Steve Cooper, the head coach of Nottingham Forest, I think that's who he is.
Yeah,
said I forgot. He praised Ethan Horvath and said that he's amazing on loan and crushing it, and like he's like a little bit of a conundrum for him. And Stefan and Horvath, I think, are 3rd and 4th in the championship right now, and they're on like smaller clubs, right? Championship.
Well, it's
oh, what is up with my computer? Every day I try to cancel Yahoo and make Google the default, and every week Yahoo is the default. So whenever I put stuff in, I get so confused.
Your technology hates you.
I don't know. I'm incompetent.
Anyway, I think that's the beauty. That's the beauty of this game, that you still. It's not like other sports, like for example basketball. You trade 2 players and everything changes. And everybody just falls in line. It's like it has to be a coherent, and I think much more in soccer than other sports. It's like it's more. Your worst player is almost more important than your best player on the field. Like your weak link is going to do much more damage than your best player can. And we see this in MLS, right, where people then just drop these superstars into mediocre teams, and it just makes little difference.
Well, what's funny about the Champions League is this, for all the German clubs, it's like the haves versus the have-nots, I think. Let me take a look here. My Yahoo's driving me crazy. Okay. So including Bayern, right?
Yahoo.
So,
I didn't realize Yahoo still existed.
I know
Yahoo
me
is still a website that you can go
me
to.
me freaking neither. And they will not stop shoving themselves in my face. And
You're
they're
the only-
mad.
because you're their last user. They don't want to let go.
What you like?
If Stefan switches to Google, that's it for us.
Well, then so be it, because they are not. You put in championship on Yahoo, and it's a bunch of links, and they're like the championship basketball
I
game.
like
And it's like,
how
no.
I like how you're giving it the European pronunciation. Yahoo.
Yahoo. There was a time where Yahoo was like, for a very short period of time, Yahoo was what Google became. Like in the mid to late 90s, Yahoo was the big website, the big tech company.
Yeah.
But little old Google came by because their search algorithms were just maybe a little bit better, and the rest is history. But anyway, so the German matchups in the Champions League are RB Leipzig versus Manchester City, which is very much a have versus a have.
That's next week, though, isn't it?
Yeah, that's next week. So I'm just doing all four of the matchups.
Okay.
And then the other thing next week is Eintracht Frankfurt against Napoli.
Yeah, another really interesting one.
Because Napoli is on fire. They're like the exception to Italy right now. They're like the only club in Italy that knows how to win. And Eintracht Frankfurt's doing well, but I think Napoli is on just a little bit of a better trajectory than they are. Then it's the two games this week, which is, like I said, Dortmund, Chelsea, very much have versus have not. And then the one German club that's the exception, Bayern München, is playing the one European club that's the exception, PSG.
Yeah.
So like Paris Saint-Germain outspends Bayern probably 3 times to 1 at least, right? Or something. The PSG definitely splashes more cash than Bayern München does. So Bayern München also is meeting their match.
But
so
PSG have struggled historically, right? In the
I'm talking just about money.
In the Champions League. Yeah. No, please go.
I'm talking about money. Although PSG has done well, they were finalists when Bayern won. PSG were the second place team, and PSG were second place last year, weren't they? I think they have a couple silver medals as of late, but they've never won. But they got Messi, they got Neymar, and there's that whole back and forth. Julian Nagelsmann's got. Yeah, where did it begin? So all I'm going to try to say is that all 4 German matchups are the haves versus the have-nots. And the 4 German clubs are the have-nots, but they're very creative in their low-budget roster building. Let's put it that way. Except for maybe Bayern being the exception. But, yeah. But, when Bayern lost Robert Lewandowski, they got Sadio Mane, but Choupo-Moting replaced him. But anyway, those are the 4 matchups. Now, PSG versus Bayern is the big blockbuster Hollywood matchup. That's tomorrow.
That's what we were talking about for months, right? After the World Cup, Manuel Neuer's accident. It's like they're playing PSG in however many days. Now it's tomorrow. Yes.
The Bayern players limped out of the World Cup. Messi won the World Cup, so the PSG players did a little better of the World Cup than the Bayern players did. It's been a little while. PSG, like Leo Messi seems to be in great form right now.
Well, he missed the last game, though. He had a hamstring. Mbappe is injured, and Messi is also perhaps a little dinged up, unless he was held out. So they're not at their best right now.
That's the whole thing. Nagelsmann got into a little war of words. They're having PSG and Bayern are having a mental game right now. And I don't know if Julian Nagelsmann's doing that on purpose or he's just flung into it. Because Julian Nagelsmann's also still amongst the Neuer crap. He wants the news to be like, I want all that to be brushed on the rug. I don't want to talk about that anymore. And he's like, also, I was misquoted by PSG saying their entire attack isn't going to be there. Essentially, he's starting to eat his words a little bit. So he's increasing his own pressure. But all the big players are confirmed to play. I think that was the thing. I think Mbappe will be there tomorrow in the starting lineup. Let me see here. That's what I read today.
Oh, is that official? I thought that was.
There we go. Mbappe, Messi in PSG squad to face Bayern.
Okay. So
they're in the squad. Whether they start or not, who knows? But I'll put money on it if they're starting, right? Isn't that the whole point that they're there? If you pay $1 billion for Messi and Mbappe for the entire season, it's to play Bayern München in the round of 16. That's like the only game they're paying for because that's what they want. They want the Champions League. Neymar confirms director clash, upset by leak. I'm just reading this new article. In addition, Neymar has confirmed he was involved in an argument with PSG sporting director on Saturday, and then was mad that it was leaked out. So the PSG nonsense is still happening. They're all still fighting, but all three of those players will be healthy and playing against Bayern München tomorrow. I don't know if they're coming off the bench or not, but they'll be there, and that's already quite a handful for Bayern München. I mean, Bayern München has finally gotten their W's back with Wolfsburg and Bochum. But PSG is sort of the next level up. So we'll see if like I said,
it's the next. PSG is the next level up from Bochum. Yeah.
Well, from Wolfsburg at least. So that'll be just two really fun games. How are you feeling about the Bayern PSG game? Do you think Bayern is ready to win, or do you think PSG is going to prove to be the more quality than they can handle?
It seems like Bayern is getting it together. I think their period of weakness is on the upswing. It seems like their defense is sorting themselves out somewhat. I mean, I watched that Bochum game. I don't know how much stock you can put into that. That Bochum, that's not Bochum and PSG are not on the same level. But I think this is coming at a good time potentially for Bayern. I think like 3 weeks ago I would have been more worried about them. I mean, not that I care all that much, I guess, but one way or another, you're the Bayern guy. This this Saturday there was this big celebration, 50 years of fan friendship between Bochum and Bayern, and the two fan communities have these long connections. I never really bought into that. I never really gave a shit about Bayern, and I still don't really. I think now living in the US, I feel a little bit more sympathy towards them from a distance, but in general, I don't care how they do. But anyway, I think they're going to be okay, but it's a close. I don't know. I'm not going to say they're going to blow them away. I think they're probably. It's coming. Like I said, it's coming at a good time. I think they're on an uptick. They're getting it together. They're finding their rhythm, and I think PSG seems like they're a little banged up and not in the best of forms. But these Champions League games, they have their own dynamic. This doesn't always, right? We can't always translate league form into what's going to happen in the Champions League. It's just going to be interesting to see. It's hard to predict. I think Bayern's I'm going to say it's going to be a 1-1 tie tomorrow. Bayern's going to get a draw in Paris, and that's going to put them in a good spot.
Yeah, I think that'll be a good result. These are the games, like I am quote unquote a Bayern München fan, but these are the games in which
why the quotes?
Well, because once upon a time, like Bayern München is the German export. Like I was a big soccer fan for years, but I used to live in a place where they didn't have the Bundesliga on TV. So the only exposure to club football was Bayern München in the Champions League and the rest. In my first Champions League season that I watched the World Cup in '98. I loved it. And then I'm just like, how do I get more of this? And I realized there's this thing called the UEFA Champions League, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. Rivaldo playing for Barcelona, the great Barcelona years. And like the German teams were Bayern München, with Mario Basler and Stefan Effenberg and and Oliver Kahn and Sami Kufor and Patrick Anderson, Swedish back. I can name that whole team. Michael Tarnat, Alexander Zickler, all these old school guys. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Great Karsten Janker up top.
Oh, yeah, up top. That's right.
Anyway, so Bayern München was there, and then the other German teams were Hamburg, 1860 München, and Bayer Leverkusen. Those are the other three clubs. Bayer Leverkusen still around.
1860 München?
Yeah,
really?
They were in the Champions League.
When was this? Well, this was not.
This was the 98-99 season. It was the Champions League. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they finished fourth place the year before, and they were great. They had that great coach. I Forgot his name. And their leading goal scorer is a guy named Martin Max. If you remember Martin Max, he was a German player, played for 1860 München. For whatever reason, never played for the national team, or not much. Anyway, that's what the German setup was. And Hamburg was also in great shape. Like, I'm from that area originally, so I should have been more of a Hamburg fan, I guess. But they just never clicked with me. But then all three of those clubs, other than Bayer Leverkusen, every year it was really just Bayern München and who else. So Bayer Leverkusen were also still in the running, but again, I was just more into what Bayern München had going on, because Bayern München just had a cool thing going. As a club, it was very cool. However, what soured me over Bayern München is the fact they won 10 years in a row. So the domestic game, it's like not fun anymore. For me to root for Bayern, beating up on little kids, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, however, my Bayern fandom does come out when it comes to Champions League. That's back to when I was a kid in a candy store. It's like, but it's because Bayern München do represent Germany against the world when it comes to Champions League. You know, half of their starting lineup is the national team. They are the premier elite club. You know, and they are the only club that really can win it. You know, I know Dortmund and Bayer Leverkusen have been finalists. The last German team to win a Champions League other than Bayern was Dortmund in '97, and that's 25 years ago now. So Bayern München is really the club. So when it comes to Bayern versus PSG, hell yeah, I root for Bayern. That's when I'm like unapologetically a Bayern München fan.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Sounds good. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I feel that way. I feel that way a little bit more now that I'm far away.
Right.
I care more. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I just looked up 1860 Munich, 2001 season. They were in the Champions League. Played 2 games, lost them both. But that is the period in my life when I had only the first few years when I came to New York. I watched very little. I didn't keep up.
Well, it wasn't on TV then.
It wasn't on TV, and I also just was like, when in Rome, I watched a lot. You know, I watched a lot of the Knicks back then. I watched a lot of the Yankees. Yeah, 2001. 2000. Yeah, that was the team. Was I a big fan of Latrell Sprewell? I mean, I was a fan of that team when they made the finals without Ewing in, was it 99 or 2000?
They were swept by
Marcus Camby.
They were swept by
Sprewell. Allen Houston.
They were swept by Tim Duncan and Darryl Robinson.
And the Spurs. Yeah, they had no chance. Yeah, the Knicks they never won. They were always, but they were consistently good back then in the 90s anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I watched a lot of basketball, watched a lot of baseball, got into the Yankees were good back then. So those years I have very little. My Bundesliga knowledge is pretty limited.
You know who was big too back then? I guess I got my years kind of mixed up. If 1860 was in 2000, that would have been the next year. But Sturm Graz were really big. Austrian club Sturm Graz. Not really, really big, but I think they got to the semis or the quarters or something, you know. Now the only Austrian club that can do anything is Red Bull Salzburg. But back then it was Sturm Graz were the big club, you know.
Yeah.
And then also it was a little more like varied, like Dinamo Zagreb was really good. They got far. The Glasgow Rangers had a good team. They went far. Like clubs that are small potatoes these days back then had more of a fight.
Well, things change. Yeah, these things are not set in stone, even though some people, Super League proprietors, they want to set it in stone, but it's
like
not.
The Dutch clubs, like Ajax and PSV, were like contenders.
Yeah.
Ajax made the final a couple of years ago, and that was a Cinderella story. You know, back in the day, that wasn't a Cinderella story. Ajax were a contender. I remember when DeMarcus Beasley got to the semis with PSV. That's the best American's ever done. But he lost his spot to Jefferson Farfan, who then later go to Schalke. Anyway, the good old days, the good old Champions League. So I look at tomorrow and sort of bring that back of like Bayern are the team year in and year out ready to go. You know, when they get eliminated from the round of 16, it's disappointing. Like when they were eliminated by Liverpool, was it last year or 2 years ago? Was it last year? They were eliminated by Liverpool in the round of 16. That was disappointing.
Yeah,
might have been last year.
Well, they've been champions. You know, they're always one of the.
They
top
were the COVID
teams.
champions.
But I mean, is it? But PSG against Bayern, there's no shame in losing for either of these teams.
No.
These are top teams.
But Bayern München, I remember when they won in 2001. Like they lost in '99, that famous final where Man United scored 2 last-minute goals in stoppage time. Heartbreaking. It's the first final I ever watched live. And then they won 2 years later. They finally won. And then the whole point was they were supposed to win again soon, but they didn't. They didn't win again until Jupp Heynckes in 2012, where they beat Dortmund.
Well, they had that heartbreaker where they lost on penalties at
against
home
Chelsea.
against Chelsea.
Ugh.
Right.
I watched that
That's
game.
That's the only time I really felt bad for Bayern.
I watched that game at the Triple Crown.
Wow. Yeah.
I watched that game at the Triple Crown bar in New York. Which is a bar we used to go to all the time.
I was just there. I was just there the other night for the first time in many years.
What's that like over there?
I had a burger at the food still sucks.
It's a good pub for what it is.
The basement. I don't know. I once at the Triple Crown hardly bit into a chicken wing and it was completely raw inside.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh boy. The basement was not open the night I went. I was at this Christmas. I was at a Christmas party, like a work Christmas party around the corner. And then with this friend of mine and we left. I was like, oh, we'll go to the Triple Crown. And he was like, this place sucks. I'm like, yeah, it's true.
I used to go there all. Those are one of my hangout spots because for the listeners at home, in the basement of that bar, the way that New York works is like, if you do shows, if you're a musician or a comedian like we were or whatever, you do your shows in the back rooms or basements of bars. It's like where all the venues are. Because in New York, bar culture is very competitive. So they're all trying to put up shows to kind of get people to come, I guess. And the Triple Crown turned their basement into a little theater for the improv community. So the bar was always full of improvisers like me, and it was a sports bar. Like it's a horse racing bar. Like Triple Crown refers to the horse, but they have a lot of TVs and there's always football on TV. I went there to watch.
It's got an Irish theme going on. They try to cover all their bases,
Yeah, comedy, soccer, Ireland, horses, whatever you want. I took my mom there to lunch once. It's a decent pub lunch spot, I guess, unless you get a raw chicken wing. But anyway. I watched the Bayern München Chelsea game there, and I was just when it was over, I was so heartbroken because Bayern München, it was in München. They dominated that game. Or it was in Berlin or something. They dominated that game, and then Chelsea just held tight, pushed in the penalties, and on a fluke beat Bayern in penalties, which is weird, which is hard to do.
Bastian Schweinsteiger missed one, right?
Did he? I just remember I think Drogba made it. And was Ballack part of that Chelsea squad, or was he already gone? I don't remember, but might have already been gone. But I remember when that was done, me walking to the subway 3 blocks away to the end train, and I was so depressed and so downtrodden. I was just like, whoa, like just dragging my feet, being like my heart was broken. So it was good that when they won again, but then they didn't win again until 2 years ago. So they're a club that should win more. They should win it once every 5 years, but they tend to win it once every 10 years almost. You know what I mean? Like, I think if I were in the Bayern board, if I were Oliver Kahn, I'd be like, we need to win this more. Like, Real Madrid won it 3 times in a row. And then they won it again last year, Yeah. So we need to be, So this year, Machen, win it again. So, we got the squad for it. Anyway, that's the Champions League.
Competition stuff. There's a bunch of, PSG has Neymar, Mbappe, and Messi.
Whoever those guys are.
I
know. Yeah,
you demand victory. You demand they beat.
Come on, Alphonso Davies. Get him right. Get him, Fonz.
All right.
Get him. But you're right. They got in Jan Zonga. They plugged him in. They're prepared and ready to go. So wish them the best.
We'll find out.
Preview.
There's a bunch of Liverpool against Madrid. There's no German teams in it, but that's a banger too.
Oh yeah. Well, Madrid's going to win that by landslide, right? Because Leipzig versus Man City is interesting because Man City is not as impervious as they've been in the past. And neither is RB Leipzig. We could have glossed over it, but the big game over the Bundesliga weekend would have been Leipzig Union Berlin, right? And Union Berlin was able to get
I watched it. They came from behind. Yeah, Leipzig looked like they were in control, and then Union just turned it around. Yeah. Also, sort of a semi-controversial. Well, not semi, definitely controversial. VAR called back equalizer, which featured that whole thing about, I don't know if we want to dig into the finer points of the offside rule.
The defense being involved or not, or whatever.
Yeah, it's sort of like it was a defender, a Leipzig, an Union defender trying to make a play for the ball. and hit it with his heel, and then it landed at Timo Werner's feet, and then the play sort of developed from there. That finally led to the goal, and this then became this whole question of deliberate play, where it used to be if you play the ball as a defender, if you try to play the ball and you touch it, that basically negates the offensive player being in an offside position. But that rule was now changed to now mean you have to have some kind of intention of playing the ball, or you have to have made some kind of attempt. It's basically the referee had to decide whether he made a play and he messed it up, or he couldn't make a play and it just sort of touched him inadvertently. And the referee, because in that case, then the offside would not be negated. So the referee looked at it on the monitor and he said, no, he could not make a play. The ball was behind him. He just lifted his heel and he made contact, but that was not him trying to make a play. And then the Leipzig coach tried to make the point. Marco Rose was saying how players can juggle the ball with their heel 20 times. So to say that he couldn't have played it in that way was nonsense. And so that was the controversy. And it would have been a great story because they brought the old guard out. You know, they had Timo Werner and Fabio Silva, all these supposed whippersnappers. But when they were behind, who did they bring in? They brought in Forsgård and Yusuf Poulsen off the bench.
The old school guys, yeah.
The old school guys. And Poulsen, who has really been there since third division.
Well, we talked about this. They're like, especially Forsberg, they're not of the quality they should be. I think they're like club guys. They're people like them.
They're a little a little long in the tooth, but in this case, they almost made a difference. If not for this controversial call.
How do you feel? Do you think it was a good call or a bad call, personally?
Well, I think it was correct. I think it was correct in the end, I would say.
Right.
I mean, that rule is odd.
Right. Well, the famous case was a couple of weeks ago was that Manchester United goal. Remember, like
there's a few. There's lots of examples. It's like it basically, and I think it becomes.
And that was called offside, right? Or was it called onside? I forgot what it was, but it was very much.
No, the Man United one was called on because he didn't interfere, which I thought that was also. Well, I think that was a little bit different because that was, I think that was also correct in the sense that he didn't really interfere.
But it boils down to having to memorize. Like it boils down. This is one of those things where it's a call related to reading the players' minds. It's like you can't really read their minds, so you have to just make your best judgment.
Well, and also, it's not really clear cut because and plus now with this like delayed, when people call these offsides in a delayed way, they let the play out. It's even worse in a way. And I mean, the whole point about the Man United thing was like, oh, the goalie would have reacted differently if he knew he didn't have to worry about this player. But the goalie has that problem now all the time.
Yeah,
because on any kind of free kick into the box or whatever, there's like 5 guys coming at him. 3 of them might be off. He doesn't know, and so that's a thing that is a problem for a goalie no matter what. And with this deliberate play idea, I think it's what's problematic is that it sort of penalizes the player, the defender for interfering. Like if he doesn't know if the guy's offside or not, if he lets the ball go and the attacker gets it and he's off, then he's off. But if he tries to play it and he deflects it and then the attacker gets it, then the offside is sort of is no longer in effect. So I think that's odd about this rule, that it basically and that's why they changed it, because it used to be like any kind of contact was bad. So then you have these absurd goals where this guy is just kind of bounces off somebody and then you're not offside all of a sudden. So then they changed it, but now, like you're saying, it's kind of, you have to consider all these things, all these, intention, what could he have done, these hypotheticals. So that is difficult. So I think the rule is odd, but I think it was correctly applied.
Good. I think it was. That's good. So Union Berlin get the 3 points. 2 quick last thoughts. The big surprise game over the weekend is the Bundesliga dares you to predict it. It's Hertha
blowing away Mönchengladbach.
Yeah, it wasn't even it wasn't just a win. It was just that's why the Bundesliga is so special. It's like a club that could like lose 10 in a row. Their first win could be like a 7-0 destruction of Bayern München or something like that. I know it's a little bit of exaggeration, but they beat Borussia Mönchengladbach. Yeah, they beat Daniel Farkas, Mönchengladbach, the young Joe Scally. They beat them 4-1 with Hertha Berlin. Yeah. And good. I don't know. Like to me, this is probably just like an isolated incident, right? I don't think it means anything. This doesn't mean that Hertha is all of a sudden going to go in a destructional phase in the last part of the year, but it was still a fun result. Good for Hertha because that club always underperforms. Berlin deserves better. Thank God Union is there. And then the other last thought is, I guess the Bundesliga race is pretty exciting. They're all only a handful of points away from each other, right?
And Union is very much in there. I definitely thought Leipzig would win this, and Union, Union would sort of maybe drift to the bottom. That's not the case. Union is a point behind Bayern. They're not going away. Dortmund won. They're behind. They're there. Freiburg got another. Got a win back against Stuttgart. They came from behind, had a little trouble, but they're back in 4th. Leipzig is in 5th. Frankfurt also lost pretty decisively to Köln,
right?
Which was not a shock. Köln has been very good since the break, but still 3-0. So they kind of dropped out. Leverkusen had been struggling. They got a win at Hoffenheim. Hoffenheim really are
Hoffenheim is the trouble club. And they were just recently assigned a great new coach to right the ship and fix all the wrongs. Mr. American himself, Pellegrino Matarazzo, the boy from Jersey himself. Who sort of got his start. He's got a lot of starts, but he spent a lot of time with the Hoffenheim youth squads back in his day, and now he's back to be the senior manager at Hoffenheim. Last week, I jokingly said that he'll be the new coach of Hoffenheim. Turns out, I was less than 12 hours from being 100% accurate.
You heard it here first. You heard it here first for once, yeah.
Here first, and then because we thought it was going to be Ralf Hasenhüttl, which makes sense. But Ralf Hasenhüttl is still out there. But the coaching carousel continues, as this might be a good sign of the times for American coaches. Because apparently Jesse Marsch is about to be the next Southampton manager.
In contention for Southampton.
Right away.
My boy Bela Kotchap is going to be his charge.
Well, you know what that means, Bjorn? That means the next Leeds United manager, ladies and gentlemen, is Ralf Hasenhüttl. He's just going to go over there. And whoever the old Hoffenheim manager is, he's up next. So
for a little bit at Leeds, they had former NYCFC player Andoni Iraola on the list, but apparently that is not happening. That would have been very exciting. As a coach, as a new coach. Yeah.
Cool. Well, and then so Bundesliga top flight's exciting. Got Champions League. Okay, last super thought. I have all these last thoughts. Max Kruse at NYCFC, Bjorn. What do you think?
That's a tough one.
Of course you take him. He's a number 9. You need a number 9.
What? Well, is he a 9? Is he a 10? He's like
he's whatever he needs to be.
Is he even in shape? Does he even want to? He said MLS is interesting. I saw that in his recent Doppelpass interview. He seems like a troubled guy, like he's got a big ego. He's got a big attitude.
MLS.
I don't know. He's going to be. He would have all the makings of the Euro import in MLS, who just kind of shakes their head and is like saying like, "This is all stupid," and I'm not gonna. He has more. I would put money on him being Rafa Marquez more than Thierry Henry. I would think.
Yeah, well then, stay away. Stay away. All right. Any sort of last thoughts about this week in German soccer from the Schnitzel Boys?
That's it. We did it.
We did it. We will see you as we talk the American Hour for a little more Schnitzel Boys as Monday night, Schnitzel night, the fan party continues, and you're invited. This is the Schnitzel Boys Bundesliga fan hour, and we've got German clubs in the Champions League. Mach hin!
Yeah, all good luck. Good luck to all of them. They're not all gonna. I'm hot take. Not all 4 are gonna survive this round.
Press like and subscribe and whatnot. Rate and review. Tell your friends. Join the party. We're on YouTube. We're on Podcast Land. We're around. Send us an email. Say hi. You're part of the party. You're part of the. You're an honorary Schnitzel Cup. All right, tschüss. Bis nächste Woche.